we're gonna dive into the deep end. Does machismo affect Latinx communities? If so, how? And within that question, can machismo still be prevalent even if there's a matriarchy?
Mm.
Wait, which one?
So it's question 4. Does machismo affect Latinx communities? If so, how? And like the sub part of that is, can machismo still be prevalent even if like you view your family as a matriarchy? So I don't know if like y'all heard the previous podcast that Alma and I did before, but this is a question we also it was similar. We asked about your family, like family dynamics. So what I had said about my family dynamic is that I kind of view it as a matriarchy, because especially like on my mom's side, because there's a lot of like really strong women on that side. And even though it's a matriarchy, or I view it as a matriarchy, there still are a lot of like machista values within that. So like with my grandma, for example, she does all the cooking, like she stays at home, she serves my grandpa, like all of this. And that's even seen like among some of my aunts, not all of them, but like among some of my aunts, they also do the same thing. So it's like my family's very women based and very, there's a lot of women empowerment within there, but they still hold on to some of the same like values. So that's kind of like where the question is heading, like, do you see that in your own families, even if it is a matriarchy, or how do you see machista values being played?
For my own family dynamic, I don't know exactly where it would fall in. Like, because as much as I'd like to say that it's like 50-50, I think it varies on a day or weekly basis. But even if it were like, let's say, to fall into the more defined matriarchy, matriarchy can, even though yes, it means that a woman, is the head of the household, but you can still uphold machista values.
I would say to answer the does machismo affect Latinx community? Yes, period. Because I would say that I think, like how I mentioned earlier, I would say machismo is very deeply instilled in the Latinx culture, especially the power dynamics that it plays, where in the deep history, the male was always seen as more than the female, and usually mujeres were, like how I mentioned earlier, um, they were I guess their contributions were seen as less significant, and usually they were meant to be submissive, so to give in to the male counterpart. And so I think that it does affect Latinx communities. It affects, I think, both the male and female, or like, how would I use, I don't know how it would, the language, but even like, I guess, non-binary kind of identifying folks within the Latinx community, because even I would say like I guess male identifying folks, they also suffer from like the toxic machismo from it. So I would say it affects the community as a whole, and it just continues to play like this really big dynamic where one counterpart is seen as more than the other. So with that comes I would say a lot of, I guess, toxic habits and ideologies. So yeah, I wouldn't know how to answer the second part if machismo would still be prevalent in a matriarchy, just because I feel like I grew up in a patriarchy, and all the families within my family web are based off patriarchies. Um, so, but if I were to speak upon, I guess, like very like far away relationships, I would say yes, because if you are a part of the Latinx community, you experience the machismo, I guess, the machismo in it, and it can even be from like your last name, or even if you notice, I mean, my mom, for example, her last name is, or in Mexico, we're from Mexico. In Mexico, it was, when she got married, it was Irma Gonzalez. It was first her maiden name, so Irma Gonzalez de Guzman. So of Guzman. And that literally just adds on to like the ownership of women, of mujeres, to men. And so I think that's just it can definitely still be prevalent even if you are in a matriarchy. Even the practices, because um it's just a whole like upbringing kind of history. So yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree, like, with both of y'all, that of period, no qualms here. Like, of course, machismo is so reinforced in Latinx communities, as well as through the Spanish language. So the fact that if there's groups of men with one woman in it, it's equivalent to saying ending with the O. Then if there's like 10 women and one man, you still have to say nosotros. You know what I mean? Like, not have to, but it's like that's just the way that it is. And I didn't learn to question that until we read Gloria and Saldoa in Dr. Barrera's Chicanx literature class. And I was just like, wow, like the fact that we don't question the sayings like Callita te ves más bonita. It's just like, shut up, your opinion doesn't matter because you're a woman and no one gives a fuck. Like, suck it the fuck up, quietly and silent, do your thing. In my household, I see machismo showed up in the form of emotional neglect from the part of my father. So that passed on to us, my sister and my brother, and our generation, to basically be like not accepting of our emotions and not having the security to find our voices. It was, if you feel this type of way, if you're crying, why are you crying? Like, immediately denying your reality, denying your humanity. Like, why? Or just making it so that, like, I would go to my room, I let it all out, and I learned that I couldn't be feeling emotions or crying in front of people. And now I'm the complete opposite. And I'm like, that took, just like Jasmine said, breaking the mold is fucking hard, especially when people aren't breaking it with you. There's people who stay in the mold, and you have to remold yourself so that you could still interact with them. You know what I mean? It's hard, yo. And then it's like, why is it our work to do? You know, like, we didn't ask for this. And it makes it so much harder because then we have to end up doing other people's work. Like, I have to work hard so that my dad could see like that that's not okay. You know what I mean? And it's just like, I realized at a certain point, like, he's not my son. Like, if he wants this for himself, like, men have to break out of that themselves. And it's something that I struggle with on so many levels, you know. But anyway, yes, I do think that machismo can also be prevalent in a matriarchy, even more so, because just that transition, like, people don't believe in it, people don't see it, and it's just from a patriarchy to a matriarchy, there's so many people who refuse to see that change, who refuse to acknowledge it, and they refuse to grow.
Period. No, yeah, I feel like I agree with everything you guys have been saying. Like machismo is everywhere within the Latinx communities, countries, families, everything. Like even when we are surrounded by strong mujeres, like that patriarchy is still gonna make it's like gonna creep its way in somehow. Like at home, like my mom is like que tienen los pantalones bien puestos, but still it's like the way she raised my brothers, it's like completely different. Like con ellos, like she would let them be out and about, like no questions asked. But with me, it's like, con quién vas, a qué horas, like cuánto te vas a tardar, everything. Like she wanted every little piece of information. And then like, especially with my older brother, it's like my brother would just be like, oh, I'm leaving. And then she would be like, okay, que te vaya bien. Like no questions asked. And I'm like, what? Like, come on. It's like, and like she always says, like, se vino pa acá to have like a better life, to offer us like something better. And so that like if she ever did have daughters, like they wouldn't be raised like or struggled the same as she did. But it's like you're still trying to impose those like old costumbres from Mexico on my sister and I over here, and like dándole la libertad a my brothers. So it's like not much is like, yeah, some things have changed, but still like those old costumbres are still there. Like that patriarchy is still there, like no matter what. I'm just like, oh, I'm over it.
You know, but because my mama also does the same, where she is always like, where like she literally wants like a full file report before I head out. But I always question whether if it's because of the patriarchy or if she's just genuinely worried about, again, me not coming home.
Yeah. I feel like, that could actually be a really big part of how, like, this whole, like, some machismo or machista ideologies are embedded within the women, because talking about, like, femicide earlier, like, how women aren't really safe, that's also probably, like, where it plays in. But that's something, like, I didn't think about until you said that, Esperanza, is that it's most likely because of our safety, and like they know that when their sons go out that they don't have as much to worry about as like we as women.
And that's because this is the conversation that I've had with another classmate where we were talking about machismo the same as the patriarchy. And we were talking until we came to the conclusion that machismo is like a subcategory of the patriarchy for Latinx communities, and how it could somehow also be a survival mechanism that we have adopted. And that's when like she asked these questions about like where it is I'm going, who am I going with, am I really going with, or like who else is going to be there, what time will I be back, how am I going to get there, like all of those questions. I always just think, you know what, I'm like, it's better to answer, and that way she knows at least my precise location, than think of any worst case scenario. Because to me, like when I get those questions, yes, as annoying as they are, I'd rather be safe than sorry.
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of like it was drilled into my head as soon as I was old enough to like start going out with my friends, that I tell my mom like where I'm going, and like when I'm on my way home, or if I was going out of town with a friend, she would even tell me like make sure they drive careful, like even just like little things like that. And it's like yeah, sometimes you don't really think about that it is because of your safety, and sometimes it is because you're a woman and you're more vulnerable, and that's why it is embedded. So it's like, yeah, it's really weird, and I never really thought about that difference either, about like that machismo is more of like a subcategory to the patriarchy. So it's like within the Latinx community, it's kind of, we have to deal with both. We deal with both
Mm-hmm.
the patriarchy and machismo. And then sometimes it's interesting to know that machismo came as like a form of safety, but it's also like, when does that safety become violent too? So it's like too much safety can end up turning into the violence that you don't even want.
Mm-hmm.
I think you mentioned something very important, and that made me bring or think about how, yeah, that is true, about how like the patriarchy has kind of in some ways become kind of like a safety, you said safety guard, safety net, safety source. But yet, sometimes when we think about like male partners, within like relationships, how sometimes within like the own relationship, the partner is like the most dangerous aspect, within, like if we think about domestic abuse, like I don't remember the specific statistic, but usually, um, one of the, I guess, to say general without being like, without saying specific numbers, because I forgot what it was, but um, within domestic abuse, it usually like the first person who they question is the male counterpart. Like even with like amongst like femicide, like they look at the male counterpart, they question, that's the first person they question, because usually they're the most dangerous subject, you know and so then there's that, I guess that question, like sometimes the person who you seek safety from are the most dangerous, and it's usually the male. So I think that's an important, that's when, yeah, that machismo and the patriarchy can also be, I would say, detrimental or like dangerous, you know
Yeah.
so I think that was important.
So we did kind of touch in a little bit to like some of this, but for one of the questions that goes along with this is, how do y'all think machismo affects different genders and sexualities? So we talked about earlier how there is a spectrum of gender. There's a spectrum of even womanhood, because that kind of goes along with your gender as well as your gender expression. And then even with your sexuality, and I think Daisy kind of touched upon that as well, is how does that affect our identities like that?
Yeah.
I think that it affects our identity in the sense that you yourself may also have some machista ideology within, and it's a constant battle because for one, it's well, I mean, both are what make you you, whether you disagree or not. Like it's hard to change patterns away from machista ideology, but it's also what kind of shapes your point of view about gender expression and gender and sexuality. Like the most recent example that I can think of within the Latinx community, of course, is Bad Bunny's video. You know, it really just, there was a divide, and this is also just to point out that cross-dressing does not equal allyship, just to make that distinction. But it was something he did send a message, given that there was a trans woman in Puerto Rico who was brutally murdered. And some people took it as a highlight to that and like kind of like in a way honoring her. Others call for more action and others are like pardon my language, but it's like the tweets were like, you don't want this hoteria near you. I'm like, then we saw that one of the persons who he had featured on his album as well, Anuel, I decided to speak out and said that, he doesn't want that. And people were quick to call that out for toxic masculinity, which it is because we, again, don't know Bad Bunny's gender expression. And that could just be him expressing himself. That could just be him cross-dressing as well. So it was like the most recent one. And it's just so difficult to see how many perspectives there were on one video. Again, me personally, I was like, you know what? I'm like, yes, like there goes that allyship. But then like hearing from queer people, like, no, cross-dressing does not equal allyship. So it's also like taking into ourselves and analyzing what we think and trying to minimize the influence of others. But it's hard to think about any other influence and what our true opinions are when we have been ingrained to think of in a certain way.
Good point, Esperanza. Like when I first saw, because you're talking about Bad Bunny, right?
Yes.
When I saw the video, like I remember showing it to Jasmine and then showing it to my partner and being like, yes, like don't you see, like allyship, like so amazing. And the fact that he wore the Alexa shirt at the, I think it was Jimmy Fallon or on the late night show or something like that. It was like, oh, you see, like in a skirt, like he's risking himself, he's using his privilege. But then like when I talked about it with my partner, he's like, but how do you know that he's doing that? Like you said, Esperanza, like how do you know that he's not just like
being performative?
Yes, exactly. And I was like, oh damn. Like I guess because we want to see something, we force ourselves that we're seeing it, but we don't know people's intentions. And that's the hard part with like all of this stuff.
And that's the thing with machismo. Like, I don't want to downplay anyone who has, like, gone against it, but we're so quick to applaud them for like rejecting such toxic ideals. Like, it's like my favorite thing to say. Like, you don't applaud a fish for swimming. Like, so it's something that at least that goes in my mind, where it's just like I'm not gonna applaud for people who treat others with some respect and acknowledge their humanity.
Absorbing.
Yeah, because I mean it is a lot. Like, as much like as a person who identifies as or who is bisexual for the longest time, it's just like you hear, at least in the Latinx culture, at least from what my own experience was, is that like it does not exist.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like it's again putting it on like a binary structure where it's like you're either gay or you're straight. And I think my machismo makes you think that it can only be one extreme or the other, and we ignore that there are spectrums for either gender identity, sexuality, and gender expression.
Yeah. My little brother. He's annoyed right now, but anyways, but yeah, it's crazy because I really enjoyed. I'm glad that you brought up Bad Bunny because like that's exactly what I was thinking of yesterday when I was like preparing for this, and I was like, I wonder if we're gonna bring up Bad Bunny in this because I think what he did has been, or like what he has been doing so far to show his allyship has been really good, especially since he is Latinx, and you don't really see that a lot from men within our community, like showing their allyship. But it's like sometimes it's hard because since from what we know, he identifies as a man, and it's really hard as a woman identifying person to fully put trust into that. But it's also important to allow um, men or male identifying folks to be able to learn and to practice allyship, because that's what we need as women. We need that allyship, and we need more men breaking barriers. But I think to just start that, we need more men listening. Like, I really, really hope that men are going to listen to this podcast and just like really listen. And it's great because they can't interrupt us. So like that's a good part. But yeah.
Yeah, because then you, like for me, like I personally try to be careful about speaking about men who are, I guess, non-traditional, if that's the correct rating. But because one, like, we cannot police another person's gender expression, and especially, and like if they do choose, like if they are a a non-heteronormative, then we can't also like force them to come out, because that's for every individual to choose that, and to choose like how big of a deal they want to make it too. So it's a lot of like balancing, like non-policing other people about their gender expression and sexuality, but also being aware that like you don't have to applaud basic things. Like you don't have to applaud the bare minimum.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, because it's like if you applaud the bare minimum, who knows if they're going to continue with their allyship? Because if they already get like that applause, they're going to be like, okay, I did my part, I'm good. But being an ally is continuing to do your part and continuing to learn more things. And I mean, yeah, there's always, with policing too, it's like there's always going to be people who are going to make mistakes. I know some men in my life who do their part and try to be good allies, but they mess up too. And if they're your friend and you want them to continue to learn, that's when you'll like call them in rather than calling them out. And if they are really into the idea of allyship, then they would listen to you and not get so defensive and like do their part to continue learning and also unlearning all of this patriarchal like type stuff. But yeah, like what you had said about gender expression does not identify what your gender is either, because speaking for myself, I do identify as a woman, but sometimes I like to wear like male back to what I was saying. I was talking about like gender expression and not identity, like that doesn't really necessarily have anything to do with your gender. It could, but as like for myself, I identify as a woman, but I do like to wear some aspects of male clothing. So it's kind of funny because one time I was with my mom and my grandma at Costco, and my mom was buying like a rain jacket for my stepdad, and I was like, that rain jacket looks really cool, like I want it. So my mom was like helping me look for one that was like a smaller size that I could wear, and my grandma was like, that's a jacket for men. And I was like, yes, it is, grandma, it is a jacket for men. And it's like my mom like told her, she was like, oh, Jasmine likes she likes to wear like stuff like this. She likes to wear male clothing sometimes. And like at Goodwill, sometimes, you know, thrift stores, I'll look at men's long sleeve t-shirts because I just really like how they fit on me. And I was like talking with a friend and we were talking about like my style. And we described my style as like a 12-year-old boy. Sometimes sometimes I'm a little bit more femme and I do like to wear like quote unquote girlier clothes, but other times I just like to wear like I kind of just like to wear whatever I want, like what makes me feel comfortable. And sometimes it's like a mix of both where I'll wear like a male t-shirt, but like everything else on me is like pretty femme. So it's just interesting seeing how like my style has evolved in a sense where I'm more comfortable with myself. And then it's also like hearing from family like, why do you wear certain things, or why are you looking in the men's section, or why do you like to wear like shirts that are very loose. But it's all about like that whole like breaking the mold, and your gender expression has nothing to do, well, not that it has nothing to do, but it doesn't always have everything to do with like your gender or your sexuality. And sometimes, since people put all of that together, they think, oh, because you're a female, you can't like wear male clothing, or you can't do this because you're a female. Or like even with like kids, like with my brother, for example, he's already getting it drilled into his head that there's certain things for girls and certain things for boys. And so I'm trying to like help him unlearn that too. So yeah, it's interesting.
I wanted to bounce off of that. It's interesting that you bring up like how it came to be in your family. So I remember having like a conversation with my 5-year-old nephew like a few days ago. I want to say last week. And we've been joking about like cutting each other's hair because, you know, it's like growing hella long for him. And he is used to having like shorter haircuts. So I was like, you want me to cut your hair? He's like, yeah, can I cut yours too? And I'm like, yeah. And I told him I want it really short, like yours, like just playing around. He didn't have scissors in his hand. And he was like, no, you want boy hair? Ew, that's not for girls. You're a girl. I'm going to give you girl hair. And I kept teasing him like, no, I want boy hair. Thank you. And he's like, no, like he wouldn't understand. Like, and I literally, a little 5-year-old body was like getting so enraged because I wanted quote unquote boy hair. And I thought he ended up hitting me. Like he threw a little punch. And I was just like, wow, like the things that affect a 5-year-old, that enrage a 5-year-old, are what turn into violence and feminicidios when we're older. For some cases, for a lot, they're still affected at a young age. But it's like, wow, like, can you imagine what if like he keeps being exposed to what he's being exposed and keeps believing and building those feelings of rage, like for different preferences, like based on gender? Can you imagine like what kind of adult he's gonna be one day? Like what his approach to women are gonna be, like what his views on gender non-binary or non-conforming expressions or identities, like, you know what I mean? Like, who raised this kid? You know what I mean? And it's like, if he's surrounded by a bunch of people who, you know, like, let's say he was surrounded by like a matriarchy, like, I mean, he is, but then like he isn't at the same time. So it's just like, what kind of, you know, that goes to raise a question. Like, I always correct my nieces and my nephews to the point where I annoy my sister because she doesn't like that I'm like teaching them equality, or that like you don't have to be a certain way and fall into those gender norms. And I'm questioning them. Like, for example, if she says, oh, you have a girlfriend, like, is she your girlfriend? Like at daycare, I'll be like, or boyfriend, like, you know what I mean? Like, do you have one? So, and that pisses people the fuck off, like little things like that. And it's just like, well, if I am so open about being that way, how is he still so like enraged and focused on thinking like that? You know what I mean? So yeah, I think it definitely like demonstrates the question that you asked earlier. Like, yeah, patriarchy and machismo is still so prevalent even in matriarchies, you know?
All right. Does anybody else have any other thoughts before we move on?
No.
Thanks. Thanks for the affirmation. um okay, so I'm pretty sure y'all have seen like how we've been spelling mujer, and even like with women too as well, how there's like an X in it, right? I kind of wanted to have the conversation or like to talk about if any of y'all know about the importance of the X within mujer, or if you have any of your own thoughts on the X. It's okay if you don't know either.
I do not know the exact derivative, if that makes sense, like how it started. But I would say that my first impression of it was in a way how the X is incorporated into the Spanish language, so to be inclusive. I noticed that in men is the word men is within the word woman. So I would say it is to expand the, I guess, expand like the meaning behind it. So it's not so, it's not binary, I guess, or gender conforming. And also my personal, I guess, interpretation of it, I love the X because I feel like it's like legit like chingate, like, oh no. So it adds on to that resilience within mujeres, that rebellion, like, no, I'm against that, and no, you cannot tell me. So that was my own personal interpretation. So I love the X. Yes, period.
I love that interpretation because I also really like the X in it. I never really thought about it like that, but yeah, because sometimes, like, you're right, it is kind of, especially more inclusive within our language, since we don't really have very inclusive language in Spanish. But even like for women in English, yeah, there's that men part, or like man, so you want to kind of X that out, because there is, like we talked about earlier, is like for folks who don't necessarily fully identify with women, or like they're kind of in between, non-binary, somewhere on the spectrum, it gives them that like ability to still be within that category, and like if they feel it one day, so yeah, I really enjoy the X in mujer, like referring to myself whenever I even say mujer. Just think that if it were spelled out like in a word bubble, it would be with an X and not the J, because yeah, I really do like the X in it.
And then I think also going off of the X within mujer or woman, I think it also ties into the Oaxacan mujer community. It's a community located in southern Oaxaca, where individuals don't live by the normal gender labels, and rather than them being like looked down upon or segregated within the Oaxaca community, they're actually basically they're celebrated and like in a way venerated there, because they have like a whole festival in their honor. And like I just find that amazing, because it's like to see this community be like acknowledged within a Latinx community, like country, it's amazing because you don't really see that as often, because like being trans or non-binary or just part of the LGBTQ community, it's like looked down upon within Latinx communities or families. But it's like the Mujer community, it's like they're actually celebrated, and then they're given respect, and it's just amazing.
I think it also goes to show that ideas, sexuality, gender, all existing in binary is really just federal or state idea. And even further, it's more like a colonizer.
Yeah, so another like aspect of the X, like within Mujer at least, it does tie back to indigenous communities, like how people sometimes put the X in front of like Chicana or Chicano or Chicanx, and that's like to commemorate indigenous communities, but it is also important, like when doing so, like it's okay to commemorate indigeneity, especially since we know that some of our culture, of course not all of our culture, but some of our culture did come from indigenous communities. But sorry, I like kind of lost my train of thought. I'm gonna cut that out. But yeah, so the X comes from some to commemorate indigenous culture, but it's also important to remember that like not everybody is indigenous. You might not even be indigenous yourself, so it's like to remember to be careful with the way you're going about that. But yeah, I forgot what else I was gonna say. I'll come back to it if I remember.
I didn't really know about the Mujer with the X until I saw you using it, Jasmine, at Rooted last year. On the graffiti wall where we were like a lot of spray paint. But in English, I really like the spelling too, like because I feel like a lot of the words are, well, the way I understand is that a lot of our words are centered around male experiences. So women has like the word men in it. That's what we talked about. So we're like crossing that out and reclaiming it for ourselves. And I like that.
I love how you said reclaiming it. Yes, exactly. Empowerment, reclaiming it. I love that. I love that word. And I meant to use it earlier and I totally forgot, but I love that word. Reclaiming that power, reclaiming that rebellious spirit within mujeres. Yes. Just had to say that because I love it. Yes.
Yes, that's what this is about, y'all. It's about reclaiming your power as a mujer. So shout out to y'all for like figuring that out and putting that in. But yeah, I think like I had when Alma and I started like working on this project, and we actually learned about the Mujer community from Elisa. So shout out to Elisa for helping us out with like this workshop and like mentoring us through this. But I thought it was really cool how there is this community in Oaxaca specifically, that there's no binary, and it's like y'all should look this up afterwards. Look up like Mujer community, because everybody is dressed how they want to be dressed. Some are more femme and some are like a little bit more masculine, or there's like a little bit of both. And they kind of like how Alma had mentioned, they have like a day where they celebrate their community, and they have like a march or a parade. So it's kind of like their own pride parade, but it's not in the sense where they had to make this pride parade because they are unseen. It's just because they're celebrating their community as a whole, because within their own community, they're already seen to each other. And yeah, it's just like really cool because I remember taking this gender and sexuality class for Chicano studies. And we talked about like indigenous sexualities and indigenous gender and like two-spirited folks. And like that was some of my favorite topics to learn about and to talk about, because it's like you don't realize sometimes that you're stuck in this binary because of colonization. And our ancestors probably didn't have these same ideas as like what a binary is. And at least within the two-spirited community, like you're chosen. That's like their belief in two-spirited community is like you're two-spirit because you were chosen by I don't know if it's like their god or like exactly what it is, but yeah, it's like a great honor to be two-spirited because you hold both masculine and femininity, and it's like you have this balance. So it's really interesting to learn about and to talk about, and it really reminds you of that importance, that even though you feel like you're wrong for questioning your gender, for questioning your sexuality, or for not wanting to be within the binary, you're not wrong. And like you have every right to question that because it was prevalent in our history. It was there.
Shout out to Jasmine for talking about like including our ancestors and everything, because to be honest, like I didn't think about it that way, about how gender is like more than likely caused upon colonization. So shout out to you, Jasmine.
I have to take that class. It sounds really interesting.
It was very interesting. It's an enlightening course, and it counts as your S.
What was it again?
It counts as your, it's the gender and sexuality within Chicano studies, and it counts as your S for your SJSU.
Okay. I will make note of that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. But yeah, if there's any other thoughts, y'all want to bring up anything, because we're about to close it out because we actually hit all of our questions and we've had an amazing conversation. So unless y'all want to bring up anything, I just want to thank you all for taking the time and the energy to be here. And this conversation was so incredible, and I cannot wait to get this out to everybody. And yeah, I'm excited. Thank you so much.
Hey, but the plática doesn't finish here. We could continue
It doesn't.
conversations.
Mm-hmm.
So shout out to y'all, and then shout out to whoever listens to this.
Yes, honestly, thank you, Jasmine and Alma, for inviting us and joining us in this conversation. I think, yes, very true. These are continuing topics and themes that still, continue to come up. And I'd say we are the change in this world. And so I think this workshop is so important, and I was one of the many, awaiting participants. I was very excited for this workshop, and I was excited to see what y'all presented. I'm glad that it's taking. I mean, I really wanted to see it live, but I'm glad that y'all were able to still, make it go live, although it's virtual, but still continue it and have it in this kind of, conversation based approach. And I'm sure that hopefully whoever, watches this continues to add to these conversations and that, you know, maybe this can be even a recurring workshop where we just grow and continue to share and educate one another. And so, yeah, thank you. This was very fun, and very empowering. See, just like this, this is women empowerment. And so, yeah, thank you.
We gotta reclaim our power.
Yes, reclaim. But yes.
Yeah, honestly, shout out to Almita and Hasmin for coordinating this and really just having us, helping us hold each other and reminding each other that the struggle's not over. And just because you feel alone sometimes doesn't mean that you're not validated, doesn't mean that you don't have a right, doesn't mean that it's not your choice to believe in what you want to believe in. So shout out to y'all and everybody listening. I hope that whoever does watch or listen to this feels like they resonated or connected with someone on this chat right now. Because, you know, we're on this together, whether you agree or disagree or have no feelings or are feeling everything all at once, you are not alone. Baby Muxeres.
Yeah, just to like the other speakers said, I hope that whoever's listening to this can, you know, one day live their own authentic true self, and just remember that you're on your way of becoming the woman that you never thought you could be.
Yay. Thank you. Thank you for being our audience, or not our audience, but our guests. What the heck? You guys are more than an audience. Yeah.
Interactive audience.
Interactive. Wow. Yes. I was like, Yesenia, we got you. I was like our biggest fan to be on here.
I was rooting since day one. I was like, I love this idea. I want to see it happen.
Yeah,
So,
it's like incredible how this idea expanded onto like 2 podcasts, dude. And we were just like,
now you're in a social media campaign because it has many different formats, and that's
I know. Yeah, so this workshop has like really expanded and hit hard, and I'm excited to see like if it does continue, because Yesenia, that's a good idea. I think like it could be a recurring thing, even if it's not like Alma and I facilitating it. It could be passed on to like different success leaders and different folks at the Cesar Chavez Center, and like just within the In Solidarity Network. And yeah, it would be great to see this again in like different conversations. And yeah, and it originated, we can cut this out, I don't know, but maybe we want to be as raw as possible. But it just originated, honestly, mostly from my anger of men and how like men are trash, and especially like cisgender heterosexual men, because within my own experience, especially last semester right before this came about, I was just like having to deal with these awful men in my life, and I was like, I'm tired of it. They don't understand. So thank you for being a part of this. It's really cool and very empowering.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I hope y'all have like a good rest of your day and feel empowered and look up poetry and do some art and sit in the sun.
Yes. Thank you. Take care of yourselves. Drink lots of water and rest
Yes.
and reflect.
I want to memorize a poem and I'll share with y'all on a little message chat.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll be fun.